war, the second half of the war. The first, the Germans were doing really well, and then it became one-sided. For example, when they went into Poland and the Western countries and France, so this is like in 18-month intervals. So the war lasted totally 6 years in Europe, so 18 months, or about. So 3 would have been like where the Battle of Britain, like they held. Like in football terms, like the touchdown is like really good, and the field goal is pretty good. And so that, I think that would be like the Battle of Britain. It's really good, strategically actually really good, but that didn't mean you're going to win. It just means they didn't get you. And so that would be a 3. And then here it is in 41, 42. So they got over the Balkans, they went into North Africa, they went all the way to Moscow. That was almost as good as that. And then the Battle of Moscow, they held, and then what else happened in 41 that was decent? Maybe North Africa, they held, North Africa, something like that. So it looks like the Germans are going to, they're just at halftime it's 24-9. Like they don't really have a touchdown yet or anything. But then by the next 42, 43, 40, it's just like killed. And Germany, and Winston Churchill once remarked that it seemed like before North Africa, before he called it Aliman, the Battle of North Africa, big battleground in Egypt. He said before Aliman, we never won a battle. But after, we never lost one. And it's kind of interesting how if you just divide the whole World War II in half, if you go to the beginning or halfway through 1942, the Germans and the Japanese were like unstoppable. But afterwards, we were unstoppable. It really does break halfway through. And you remember how we kind of tried to look at this with World War I, and it's kind of conveniently in 4 years, so you can divide it like in a basketball game or a football game, and you divide it up, and it looked like, kind of it went back and forth. World War I really did kind of go back and forth, and even at the very end, like Germany might win. Oh, they didn't. It's kind of like that. Well, World War II is not like that at all, and so we're studying it, really front-loading it. We're really looking at the significant parts as opposed to the interesting parts. There's a lot of interesting things, but by the halfway through, certainly, absolutely no question about it, by November of 1942, it's like it's over. There wasn't nuclear weapons, and they didn't have that. There could have been something that they could have done, the Axis, to improvise, but looking at it in hindsight, by November 1942, they were losing on every single front. So that's something that when you're studying significance, that's what you need to do. You don't just keep talking about the touchdowns that are thrown in the fourth quarter. Like the game's over. That they have their substitutes are in. Nobody. They're not even. They're just punting. They're not trying anymore or something. So you don't talk about games like that. As soon as it's like, oh yeah, I can watch something else now. If they want. So World War II is like that. Like halfway through 43, there's really nothing left to see, unless you're just interested in punts and interesting things. So that's something to. That's a generic. That's something for discussion and something to think about. So you guys, what I'm going to do for the rest of the semester, which is only 6 weeks left, we're almost done, practically studying and everything. The assignments in this class, I think this is the best thing. I'm going to show you some things. We're going to keep doing everything. But here's the thing, on your assignments for homework are going to be really pared down. And that's because it's the spring and you've got other classes. might be graduating or whatever, or everything's different. And so what I'm going to do is do a good job in class. I'm going to have outlines most of the time. And what I'll do for points is, besides the extra credit and videos to watch, things like that, is make sure so do a good job on your outlines, and I'll just quiz you from time to time, okay? Based on that, not necessarily a pop quiz necessarily, but just be ready. For example, this next week, what I think about doing is maybe like Monday or Sunday, whenever it's convenient, I'll post a little quiz, and it'll be just open notes this first one. Okay, and it'll probably be over, I don't know for sure, but we went through this Barbarossa sheet, so make sure that's pretty good. I don't know, did we go all the way through? I thought we did. Maybe not. I need to back up a little bit if I can. And then the other thing is the Soviet communist state government outline that we did last week. I think we went through all of that too. And that's on the repression. So look back over that. I'll try to, in case you're worried, I wouldn't be worried about it if you came to class or you were missing and you listened, if you took good notes. I'm just going to ask some basic questions about it. Yeah.
I don't think we did like the bottom.
Okay, well let's do that. Let's go back a little bit. We might not have.
Like where it says German successes / gains.
Oh, okay, that's about right in here. Yeah. So I think So what was I gonna say? Oh, I'll try to get these slides posted. So if you wanted to just like, God, there's one thing I didn't see one thing about, one of my notes or something. You can give it to somebody else, but I'll do my very best by tomorrow morning to post these slides. Okay, everything that we've talked about. Does that make sense? Okay, so anyway, so feel good that it's going to be like not as much assignments for you, but if you're scrounging for points, know that you can't find points. Well, so do good on the quizzes, and if you somehow do poorly, I'll give you a makeup quiz and I'll average it or whatever. But, so just do a good job. Let's make this a class. It's a class thing, and before you come back, always study what we did last. So does that make sense? Okay, so if we were looking at the Barbarossa, we talked about, let's say, help me about where were we? Okay, so I think it's about right here. So this is where they divide up Poland, and then talk about how there's army groups, Army Group North, Army Group Center, Army Group South, and how far this is at the very beginning of first couple of months, it looks like. And so see how far they were. Now, one reason why the southern part was not as far of an advance or more solidly. Notice how far the center went towards Moscow, and look how far the northern went all the way to surround Leningrad. Why is that? Well, there's a few reasons. These are the big capital cities. Also, there are two Panzer Group armies, in other words, tank armies going for Moscow, one going here and only one here. And so the South, Army Group South, had to cover a lot more ground, width-wise. And so that's a reason. It's more dispersed of a front. And so just generally, that is a significant item here for the war. One thing that comes to my mind, always is, we're not doing it exactly the way you would do. Like if this was a class on World War II, we would cover every little thing, but we've studied a lot of things, and the rise of Hitler and rise of Mussolini and all that, which is just as significant as this. So, but if we were saying this is a concept, that this is a sort of a concept of certain school of historical thought, is World War II, in essence, is all about Europe. Now, there was a whole load of stuff in the Pacific. There was from Pearl Harbor and before, there was China, there was a ton of stuff in China. There was a lot of stuff all over. There's a naval battles and everything. However, if you wanted to tell Martians about this, or somebody that's not a human, and you're like, there's this gigantic war that the humans did, and not without, you don't have any concept of anything, but just like, okay, and our little country was part of the winning side, okay, and how did that happen? Well, you really would have to, if there was a little discussion of the basics, it's basically happened in two places. It's all over Asia and it's all over Europe. But the key thing is the reason why we won both, like the United States, the Allies, the good guys won both places and then won the whole thing, was really in just to be as simplistic as possible. That's what I'm saying. This is a simplistic view. Is that it's really about Europe. Now I know Japan was really difficult and all that, but the United States put 70% of everything we had to go after Europe, after Germany. We only fought all of Japan, all of their problems, and how difficult they were. We were one country using 30%. Fighting them. We're really fighting here, it's like this. And we beat them. It took a long time, and it was hard, but we weren't even really fighting them. I mean, look, a lot of people died, a lot of people spent a lot of emotion on it, and it was really difficult and all that. There's a lot of awesome stories about it, but 70% of the United States was going after Hitler. That's what we were going after. And we still managed to defeat Japan. But when we defeated Germany, it was in May of 1945. Then we turned our whole arsenal against Japan, and we were just doing whatever we wanted, basically. And we dropped those two bombs, and they surrendered, at the end of the summer. And so June, July, about 3 months later, they surrendered. So that's what United States, with a little bit of help from Britain, a little bit of help from Russia, not hardly anything, and then China did a lot of dying for us. The Japanese were all bogged down in China that whole time. But anyway, so if we had done the other way around, that's why you say it's not about the Pacific, not really. It's really about, you had to win in Europe. Then you could beat Europe. Then Japan just falls apart. Anyway, they were already falling apart and we weren't even hardly trying. Not really. 30%? You can't win a football game with 30% of your people. You can't paint a painting with just 30% of your brain. You can't. But somehow we won a gigantic war with 30%. It was hard. What if we'd done 100%? We could have been done in 2 years. Maybe. I don't know what, but it's, okay. So it's really about, what if we had just concentrated on Japan and we didn't help Britain and all that? It would have been a whole different deal, I think. It would have been a whole different deal. We never did land in North Africa. We never did fight up this way through here. We never did, Germany doesn't have to worry about us at all, and all they can just, I think you don't know what would have happened. I don't know what would have happened. That's why Europe is more important. You don't know what would have happened if the Allies didn't concentrate. And Britain concentrated in Europe too. Britain was in Hong Kong and Singapore and Malaysia and Australia and all that. They had a lot but they concentrated in Europe. They lost a lot of stuff. So it's about Europe. It really is about Europe. Now that's up for discussion. That's a school of thought. Doesn't mean that other is nothing. We're just saying World War II went how Europe went. And not how Pacific went. It's how Europe went first. Okay. If that is true, Europe is about Russia. How did Russia do? Did Russia survive? Russia didn't survive? Oh, Russia didn't survive. Man, I don't know what you're going to do. Because Russia was up against this for 4 years. Hundreds and hundreds of divisions, millions of Germans, first-rate units, tanks, bombers, fighters, the whole thing, the Navy, the whole thing. Boom, 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 boom. And we helped them a little bit, and they won. But we talked about that before. You can't say that Americans turned the tide. We made the war go faster for Russia, but Russia won that war. They run their front, I should say. They won their front. And once they won that front, well, then you got Europe. Germany's not going to. This isn't World War I. We looked at the same concept. What would have happened if Germany had defeated Russia? Wait, they did. Remember, Russia dropped down. They didn't really win in this classic way, but they really didn't get that far. If you remember, they made it to Riga, which is amazing. They made it to right here, which is the first week of World War II. So how great the Germans were the second time around, but how greater even the Russians were the second time around. It was a massive war in itself. 4 years with division after division after division. It's whenever you want to play a war game, like a video game, what's famous is not, you don't want to play Western Front or Italy or something. And that might be fun. People play tank battles in Russia. That's where the action, that's where it's fun. God, you get to do stuff there's space and there's no bottlenecks and it's just wide open and you have hundreds and thousands of people instead of just I got Liège in Belgium, then we moved on a little bit more, which is interesting, but that's not, so this is the school of thought that you guys are students of right now. Understand, it's not the only way to look at it, but it's a way to look at it. And so I've kind of been talking to you about that, but just so you know, the reason why we're concentrating on here, because that's what this is. It's not D-Day when the Americans, that's part of it. But if the Americans didn't land in France, was that going to matter? It's not going to matter. It's going to matter to some folks who lose their lives and things, but it's strategically, as a studying in a class, the great movements, the great revolutions, and the great wars of the 20th century. That's what this is. So we're concentrating on Nazis, we're concentrating on the Soviets, and we're concentrating on the Western Front. We're going to hopefully real soon catch up to all of this and go through this whole thing in a systematic way, but we are front-loading all of this. The Battle of Britain, the Battle of France, the Battle of Russia, the Battle of Moscow. We're going to talk about a few more, and then it's kind of and then they got slaughtered, and then they kind of fell apart. So, just so you know. Okay, so that's why this is kind of going, slogging through this this part of the war. Okay, so on this, so notice the Eastern Front, and so here's the thing, is that by August, this is where the Germans are, within striking distance of Moscow, 150 miles away, something like that, and it's August. Remember, so when you're, something generally to remember is, when we're talking about this, sometimes it helps to just jot it down. You don't have anything that's hooking your mind. You don't have any background to this, but just like that, and you just, I don't know, Mr. Dunn is saying something. August 41. They were near Moscow. This is what I would be doing, and I know this. This is what I would be doing. I'd be listening. This is the way my brain works. It just jot it down. I know this, but then I go back and like, what did we talk about? Well, he had this little thing. We have that outline, so he put that on there. Like August 41, they were all Germans, were already near Moscow. And here comes a mistake. So at the bottom of that page, there's like mistakes. Well, there's a lot of mistakes, but here's one mistake. Like they were within striking distance of Moscow, and the industry leader, leading a center of Russia. This whole area right here is the industrial center. Ukraine was also very heavily industrialized, which is the southern part of Russia. Okay, so notice right here this envelopment. This when there's an army comes like this and another one's, they close in together, it's called an envelopment, like an envelope. It closes, and inside is the enemy armies that are eliminated from the war. And that's what we talked about. How do you win? You got to eliminate the people that you're fighting against, either kill them or capture them or wound them. And so Hitler was obsessed with that kind of idea, which is not wrong, but they're within striking distance in August of doing that, of getting to what supposedly was the objective. Take Moscow, take Leningrad, and Kiev. Well, here's Kiev kind of back. And you can see these pockets of enemy, of Russian, Soviet armies that are eliminated. Like this would be 100,000, 150,000. Over 300,000 were in this Minsk pocket. 100,000. This around Kiev was 600,000 that were eliminated. 600,000 Russian, the Red Army was surrounded. Here's another 500,000. So if you add up that is a lot of thousands of hundreds of thousands. If you remember, at Dunkirk, remember the British were at Dunkirk? Remember in France? And that was, we said that was a turning point in the war because the British were able to evacuate their 300,000 man army, 40,000 French. That's really a significant moment in the whole war, certainly for Britain, because then Britain can stay in the war. If you lose your pieces, you're like, well, I'm out. You play the game, like you have all your pieces. You're like, well, you don't have any more. You don't have any pieces. Well, so you don't have any pieces. Like you can't play chess, and all you have is the king. No, you can't. You can't win like that. You don't have much. Like you lost all your pieces. Your queen's gone. Like so. Basically, the British, that wasn't their queen. I don't know how to put that, but it's a major. They've lost all their pawns and a lot of their things, and they're about to lose their queen. Let's just say it's the queen. And okay, at least I can save my queen. Okay, that doesn't mean you're going to win, but at least you have your queen. You could win now. You could, and that's the thing. Like you lose the queen, like I've still got the king. You could tie. Shut up. That's stupid. Like who wants to? Like I can still tie. Like I know chess is a lot of ties, but still, when you only have the king, you're not going to tie. Not against somebody who plays. The other guy that has one pawn and a king, you're toast. That's the way that game works. People that know how to play. So the British were like obsessed with saving that 300,000 men. They just lost 1 million. The Soviets lose 1 million. So that shows you, not that they just give up and stuff, but they have a lot more people and a lot more land, a lot more to give. And so on one level, that's awesome for the Germans. Like, God, we went 1,000 kilometers from Germany, 700 miles or something. Here, all that square acreage and miles. It's amazing, like the size of France. Here's 2.5 Frances that you conquered in 2 months. It's amazing. Yet Russia's not, and Russia's given up 1 million men, and they still have fresh armies. It's demoralizing to the Germans. They're victory after victory after victory, no defeats. Victory, 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 victory. And yet there's a fresh Russian army in front of them everywhere they go. So it's demoralizing. Victory brings happy times, but it also brings like, wait, we just defeated, we just fought to the death, and we totally won, and yet now there's another one we got to beat. We got to defeat another one, and we got to do that again. That was the best thing that the German army has ever done in the history of Germany. That's like Frederick the Great. We just did that. Was the best thing that's ever been done in the history of warfare was this. I would just contend, like, arguably, up until this time, what they did with right here was the best thing that anyone's ever done. Yeah. When they were real near Moscow?
When they're like,
Yeah, so to follow the outline, yeah, so they were very close, but on that date there, I think it's December the 5th is where the Battle of Moscow actually comes into play. So, yeah, so on your outline, December the 5th. They were actually there about November, the first part of November, and it was a battle for about a month right around Moscow. So notice again here in the south that the Soviets seem to be defending a little bit better. And see, Hitler saw this. Here's one of those mistakes is Hitler saw this kind of map and say, well, and the German generals, Guderian and Bach and Hoth and all these people who know better are saying, what we need to do is not give up here or anything, but just keep proceeding with this and try to close this gap and iron out this front. But we are so close to Moscow and Leningrad. Keep going. Look at that. The 25th of August. It started on June the 22nd. That's 2 months. We're doing really well. It's just right here they're putting up good resistance. So, but Hitler saw this and said, okay, here's the deal. We're trying to eliminate their army. Let's move our main panzers from here south. And the main panzers, instead of going east, go north and close this in and we'll capture them. And that is what happened. But what that did was that delayed the attack. And people have been arguing this for 70 years or whatever, however many years it's been. So was that a mistake? Most likely that was a mistake. And it brought so you can see right here that the 9th of July, they're here. On the 1st of September, they're here. And then by the 9th of September, they did this in 9 days, which was awesome. 600,000 eliminated 3 gigantic Russian armies, but it delayed in the month. So in August, they're near Moscow. Just so you know a little bit about geography of Europe is you think Alabama and Texas and Florida, August, oh, that's awful. Like it's humid, it's the hottest time, it's just so sticky and mosquitoes and everything. But no, in Russia, it is hot, but it's not humid. It's actually the perfect time. June, July, August, and September. Eastern Europe, those are the best months. That might be probably common sense to you, but it's even more so in Eastern Europe than it is in North America or Western Europe. So when in a prime time near Moscow, they elect to go south and have a big victory. And a lot of people said this is a disaster, and it was. Each of these was a disaster for the Russians. Disasters, disasters, disaster, disaster. All these are disasters. And yet, it became a strategic mistake for the Germans. Because instead of going with their original plan, boom, 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 he improvised and moved his key forces down here to go after what they thought maybe was their bishop or their queen or their ruler. Like, hey, we could checkmate him right here. Like in about 3 moves, we could lift that. Yeah, but there's his queen's over here. Let's get the queen. or a rook. Maybe we should say that. Let's get that rook. We've got his other rook. Let's get his other rook. He'll be toast. So they go and get the rook. We're doing chess analogy. Got the rook. You could have had the king, and he was just about gone. I don't know if you guys read this or remember this, but in those first weeks, Stalin was immovable. He had a nervous breakdown. He couldn't even open his mouth. Come to me. And the first time they finally, all of those people like Vorshilov and Beria, the NKVD executioner, and all those people, like 7 or 8 of them, they said, okay, let's go see Stalin. We've got to go wake him up. I mean, nobody's having any decisions. We can't tell. He's supposed to tell us what to do. Because before he said, don't fight back. So they came to him like, blah, 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 on his door. And he said, on his deathbed, a year before he died, he said, when they came to me, I thought they were going to arrest me. They were going to kill me. So that's that culture. Like, I failed. Like, I was appeasing Hitler and all this. And so he couldn't make any decisions. So while he wasn't making any decisions, when the Germans made so much headway, because there was the lack of leadership, they didn't tell him a totalitarian state has a big disadvantage. They have some advantages, but there's a disadvantage of like, you're relying on one person to tell you everything. And that person tells these people, and this people tells these people. But down here they're saying, what do we do? You said no provocations against German aircraft. They're bombing us now. Shouldn't we fight back? No, there's a directive. Do not fight back. And so for like 2 days, they just left all the airplanes on the tarmac. And so most of their air forces are bombed out without even going up to fight the Germans. And so obviously that was a long-term mistake of Stalin. But so Hitler made a mistake of diverting when he could have gotten Moscow. Now there's some discussion. I'm just bringing up one school of thought from military historians. Like, that was a mistake because they could have gone into Moscow. And they still could have gotten this if it had just been slower. So then by December the 5th, there it is, December the 5th, this is how close they are to Moscow. You can tell they had ideas to envelop Moscow, and that's for sure. But, I made this correlation, made this sort of example. If you just were in Berlin, Germany, 2021 today, Germany, and you got off the airplane, and you rented a car, and it was a really nice Honda Civic. It was like a brand new Honda Civic, and you just, I'm renting it. It's brand new. Like, it looks on it, a mile. How many miles? They've only driven like 75 miles. Okay, this is great. Where are you going? I'm going to Moscow. Oh, okay, this is gonna be fun. We're gonna have a road trip from Berlin to Moscow, and this is 2021, and there's modern roads, and it's a long way. Well, here it is, Berlin to Moscow. It's going to take you 2 long days of driving. It's just like going to Boston. Okay, so you're going to drive, and you're going to go on new roads now. This is modern times, not 1941. I'm talking about you and me. We're doing this, and we're driving. You drive to Moscow, and when you get there 2 days later, you're going to need an oil change on that brand new, nice car. And something probably broke on it. There's probably a tire that did something. If you drive to Boston, that's what's going to happen. I don't know if you've done that. You've just driven around the country. Things happen. When you drive 1,000 miles, something happens. It could be something small. It could be like, man, what is that? Gas? It could be anything. Okay, my point is, but go back to 1941 when there are no roads. There's not a road. And we're talking about 1941 and people shooting and blowing up your tanks and stuff. Guess what conditions those tanks are in? And they've been fighting from right here to here, 700 miles. Man, they're not ready to go anywhere. They've gone as far as they could go. Now it's winter. Everything needs to be retooled. You need an oil change. You take a break. Like, you got fresh armies in front of you. Yeah, you've defeated all these armies, but they have fresh ones now. It's really demoralizing. So the Germans had a Herculean feat of what they did, but that's it. They're done. They didn't get Moscow. And so it was a major defeat about to happen, but it's understandable. Like they just went through 3 France countries on bad roads. France had good roads. That's one of the reasons why it went so easily. I just stay on the road, you know. It's May in June in Western Europe. It's nice. November, December in around Moscow, not nice. Not at all. So, okay, so here they are in October. See how dusty it is? October is still really nice in Eastern Europe, even in Russia. Snow hasn't come. It's not really rainy yet. It's actually really nice, you would think. October is kind of cold in Alabama sometimes. It must be real cold. No, it's not that much different. Like, remember, September is awesome. September and October is like, that's autumn in Eastern Europe. It's beautiful. And remember, here we are down here, Alabama, with 33 degrees. That's Africa and Israel level. Our north, like Boston and Minneapolis, Spain, that's Southern Europe. Understand? So Eastern Europe, yeah, it is much farther north, but it's actually, the fall is really awesome for tanks and stuff, and for, regular life too. So what happens in November? Then it's the Rasputitsa, which means the slosh of the mud and everything. And it happens 2 times, in March really, and in November. And so those are the 2 months that are just impassable in Russia. That works to their advantage. So the Germans had to deal with that. Not only is their equipment broken down, is now it can't move. And not only then after the rain and everything, where they can't move, then it becomes freezing. And they actually look forward to the end of November when the snow and freeze, because all this mud would freeze and then you could actually drive on it. It was really cold, but it was had to leave all their tanks and all their equipment on. I don't know if you know that in Russia, it's so cold that you have to leave engines on just so you can restart the next day.
What does Rasputitsa mean? Because I watched a video and they said that it translated to time without roads.
I guess so. Put means the way, or like a road or path or something. And Ras means like messed up. And that just makes it a noun, the end part. Pizza. Rasputitsa. So remember that guy that we studied a little bit in the first semester, Rasputin? Yeah, same name, same thing. So he's a wayward person, like someone without any way, messed up way. So ironically, his name meant it's going to be a problem. And then the guy now is Putin. That's from that same word, Putin. Vladimir Putin. But his is the Vladimir is like the ruler of the day. Everybody knows that. Putin. Anyway, I never really thought about that until you just asked that. Glad it worked out. The other thing that when you have a totalitarian state, the government can just force everybody to do stuff. And so, of course, they'd like to help, but they force all these people to build tank ditches and amazing. Now, remember on Rasputitsa, this is a good old photograph, but today, about 5 years ago, I know about every 5 years they publish something in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. They found a German tank that is underground, and it's from the Rasputitsa. What happens is, you think like, oh, I was over in Leeds the other day, and I went off on this country road. I went to somebody's farm to get some eggs or something. Like, whoa, it's been raining, and I had a car get outside, and you got stuck in the mud. You got stuck in the mud probably somewhere in America. It's like, okay, that's a real thing. It's like, and it goes down. Well, watch some YouTube things with like. There's people that get into serious mud. But look on YouTube, it's like Russian mud, 2021. And man, you don't know what mud is. But if you go back to 1941 with no roads, what happens is a heavy German tank is coming down the road, if you can call it a road, and goes down this far, 10 feet. Woof. And it's stuck, and you can't get it out. And so then they just abandon it, and now in 2021 they find it in somebody's wood somewhere. Like, it's an intact Panzer. Beautiful. I mean, it's old. It's like, what's this doing here? Oh, Rasputin, they just left it there. And just think, we can't go anywhere. And it's underground. It just goes, you have something that's 20 tons, or I don't know, how heavy are those? 50 tons, maybe? Is it 100,000 pounds? No, it's like 50,000 pounds. I don't know, 20 tons, let's say. An average car is like 2 tons. Your little car that you're driving around in is 2 or 3 tons. That's what they all are. This is a lot heavier. And the mud is like deep. Not Alabama mud. This is like it goes to China. Like blah. I'm going down. Get out. And that's 1941. And so it's not just mud. It's like the whole earth is quicksand. So that's handy on the defense. And they're really good with this, so don't ever think that the United States could take Russia in a war. Not without nuclear weapons. I mean, the Germans were the best prepared for that, and they couldn't do it. And they were ruthless, and they're going to kill everybody. Americans wouldn't get anywhere with that. If we go back to Patton, and we would have no chance to do anything like that. No chance. Look at what the Germans did. They surrounded armies after armies. And then the Russians, on the way back, I have another map that I bought from somebody, and they had, well, you can find these on the internet now. And so the Russians did this to them twice over. The Russians surrounded German armies like that too, going the other way in a year and a half. It's amazing. Ask yourself, when you look at this, ask yourself, what German armies did the American armies surround? There isn't any. In that war, we didn't do that kind of thing. We were like this, we're going like this for that. Everything ready. Why don't you go fast? Because fast is risky. It's faster, but it's risky. Yeah.
Trying fast operation during them.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. We tried that. And it took a lot of risk, a lot of guts. The the entire British Army, the entire Russian American Army tried to do something like that, and it was with paratroopers. It's actually very complicated, but it wasn't successful. We almost got some Germans there. So I don't know what we would have done. We would have had to have done that like 100 times. If we had to put ourselves in this position and we had to do that, we would have had to. That would have been impossible. We could not have done that. The reason why the Russians could do it, well, they have a big population and they have a totalitarian state, willing to kill 100 million people to save the country.
Didn't like American plane crash, entire plan for Operation Yard?
I don't know that. Maybe.
Well, it was not.
Market
It was a very true operation. We did it during the daytime, which is a whole idea.
It was a really interesting, very interesting battle. It was kind of like an insignificant, to put it bluntly, it's insignificant now. It could have improved the whole thing. It could have been where if it was successful, it would have sped up into the war. No question about that. But it's kind of like that delay. We'll talk about it quickly, but the thing is, we were basically right here. We were in Belgium, and from England and from America, Americans and the British, the entire army did the best part that we had. We decided to go, instead of directly into Germany, we decided to go up here and take the bridges over the Rhine River that go into Germany and kind of shore up the Netherlands. Instead of going directly, sort of like this thing that Hitler did. Instead of going right directly, we decided to like make sure our flanks were secure. And so they went into the Netherlands, and it wasn't successful, you know. So I mean, if it was successful, it could have been better. But that was our chance. That's very good. I didn't even think about that. That was a chance that we could have surrounded an army. And so that's why it's this. That's why it's this. That's what this is so important. Just so you be objective. This is not to idolize Russia in any way, but you know, just to be objective. There's counter arguments to this though. So Germany, Russia is really good on the defense, is my point, and they've always been pretty good on the defense. In World War II, they were very good on the offense at the end of the war. Not against Finland, not against Poland, you know, but by the end of the war, they had learned all those arrows. This is what Germany did to us. They did that for 2 years, and then the next 2 years they did it to them, and that's amazing. It's amazing. So then the winter comes, and the Russians are pretty good with this, defending their homeland. That's another thing. It's one thing to attack Finland. The other thing is to defend your homeland. You know, yeah.
Do you think if Britain had lost, that Russia would have held out?
You know, to say yes, no, I would say yes. There's a lot of more information to talk about. Generally speaking, I would say yes.
One thing to consider is that Germany wasn't expanding divisions of soldiers trying to attack Britain. It was the Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
So it's not like, for the most part,
They didn't go all out.
It's not like divisions were being drawn away from Russia.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Britain, you know, they have the Rasputitsa and all those things. Well, Britain's got their island. So, and they knew that. they know that. For 1,000 years they've been there. They know that. They factored that in. You can't say, oh, they don't even have an army. You don't need an army. You don't need a big army. We have an island. You know, you're so lucky. No, that's factored in. That's part of the culture. That's part of the whole makeup. Like, why don't they have a navy? They have a stupid. They don't need a navy as Russia.
Churchill brought that up as like address to Parliament. He was like, "We have a navy. If they try to invade us, we will sink them."
Yes, that's right.
But if they do get onto the island, then we're equipped to fight them.
We can take them one by one as they come up on the beach. You know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
But that's the whole British mentality. Is that if they try to invade us, then we'll just sink them.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
In U.S., you know, today people say, "Oh, just imagine if the Chinese landed in Florida, you'd be toast." They're not getting to China. They're not going to Florida. We have armies around the world and navies for that reason. It's over there where we'll be fighting, unless it's a terrorist attack. Now, right now, we have our armies in Germany for some reason to this day.
We do. We have armies everywhere.
We have army in Germany. Never did leave. Just in case Russia or something happens. It's handy to have them over there halfway around the world so that if you do have to respond, you can go quickly. Instead of like, okay, everybody on the boat in Florida. Like, we're going to take 3 months to get there. So, and people say, well, God, that's occupying the world. But most countries actually don't mind that, because then they don't have to defend themselves. Like Germany does not have to put as much into defending against Russia today, because the French are there, and the British, and the Americans, and the Romanians, and everybody.
The big thing is the whole NATO GDP expenditure.
Yeah.
You're supposed to spend this much money on the betterment of your army, and they don't, because they would have to buy all the weapons from us. So it's like they're just giving money to us at that point.
Yep, that's right. It's
So
it's
they
kind of an
survive.
outdated. It seems kind of outdated at this point, because Russia is not necessarily an enemy, and we're kind of making them to feel like that. They were an enemy. There's no question about it. But things are a lot different, and so they're forcing. I don't know. I think that's a whole different discussion. Okay, so the Battle of Moscow. was in December and January, December of 41. And so that would have been so much better for the Germans to have fought that in September or October rather than December. There's no question about that. So you can see how their plan was to envelop Moscow and all the encirclement leading up to that, double encirclement. Operation Typhoon, that's the final push onto Moscow. Double envelopment plan. Boom. Boom. Double. Guderian and Bach, these are, if you could pick, like, who are the best generals in that whole war? There they are, probably. Just, if you're saying who's the best quarterback of all time, well, it's either Tom Brady or Joe Montana. And, just obviously there's no way of saying, but they had their best. They had their best situation, the best. But the Soviets did put everything there too, and the Soviets came out on top. So here it is from August to December the 5th. You can see how much land they took. First, they took the Kiev pocket, and then they moved to get Moscow. Soviet defenders on that Soviet leadership, of course, there's Stalin, his right-hand man, and the military advisor and leading general is Zhukov. This is Konev right there, and this is Rokossovsky. And there's other ones, there's several other ones, but these are the ones that defended Moscow. Of course, that's just a made-up photograph. Propaganda after the war, and here's the people that got together and we saved Moscow. And we talked about how the Soviet leadership, not Stalin, but the generals, everything were typically like 40 years old. 30s and 40-year-olds. And the German generals were like late 50s and 60-year-olds. That's not super significant. It's just interesting how the Russians, that they were decimated their older people. And also Russia had been decimated by famines and all kinds of things and, and terror. And so their population was younger. But that kind of came into play at the end of the war. They learned and improvised. People that are younger can put into practice. But the German generals had a tradition that a lot of wisdom there, but it was hard for them to improvise. And so I don't know if that was significant, but that's just kind of interesting. So after they held at Moscow, then the Soviets counterattacked right away. That's the hallmark of Russia in World War II, is that right when they're on their heels, they find a moment to attack. And that's part of that theory that was Tukhachevsky and so forth that we talked about, the theories of mainly you want to be attacking. The whole thing about modern warfare is hitting, not just defending. You got to have good defense, but you need to be attacking them and then carry it forward. Just do everything you can so you can fight in their rear, in the rear of the enemy. And then that means encircling and cutting off supply and so forth. And that's totally abhorrent to American and British warfare in World War II. It's all about defend, okay, don't overextend. We're try not to lose anybody if we can. Just don't lose anybody. Okay, we won. Okay, re-equip, so re-gear up. Wait, they're running from us. We're not ready to attack them. Gear up. 6 months later, we'll attack them. Well, now they're gone. Yeah, but we aren't losing anybody. we moved up to where they are. Here they are. Okay, see, we took all that for nothing. Yeah, but you could have knocked them out. It's too risky, too costly, and so a lot of grandparents survived that war that were Americans, and that's part of our psychology. It's like, save everybody. And anyway, the Americans don't need to do that in the war. It's about Russia. Russia is fighting Germany. Why should we hurry to Berlin when the slower we go, the more Russians and Germans get killed? What's the point of making this go fast? And so that's an American idea. It's like, it can go fast, but I'm not going to spend my blood to make it go fast. Russians don't think that way. Russian history. They usually have totalitarian states, and they're like, that's what these people are for, to throw them into the fire. We're trying to speed this up, kill people. And so, that's part of the deal. And it's kind of sad, but that is part of the deal. I mean, Stalin has a famous quote. He said, a few people dead is really sad. A few million dead is a statistic that nobody remembers.
If you kill one, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
If you kill a million, then it's
Yeah. So, and he did say that, something like that. Lenin said that also. So did Attila the Hun and whoever else said that before. So, Battle of Moscow is critical. I mean, we could study hundreds of battles, but Battle of Moscow is super critical and essential to this war because Russia is Europe, and Europe is the war. And so how did Russia survive? Battle of Moscow. You see that Moscow is crucial to survive for Russia's survival. It's not the only thing, but it's also the first defeat on land where it's even odds. Germany is fighting against one power, Russia. And it's even. They have a lot, they have a lot. And who won? Russia won. Where was it? It was in Moscow. It was on land. It wasn't a navy. It wasn't, no excuses. Yeah, now, there's mistakes they made, but look, we're on land. There's not the refs. It wasn't anything. It wasn't, the weather. Well, you don't know Russia has bad weather? You didn't know that? What are you doing attacking them? They didn't know they had bad weather. Like, they knew. No excuses about that. God, the snow. I thought it was Africa. So this is a convoluted kind of map, but you can see here Moscow. So what this is on the Russian offensive. So all of this blue is what they took back from the Germans. And you can see the Germans are almost to be enveloped right here, two armies. That's the fourth Panzer Army. That's the famous Panzer Army. They almost took Moscow. It's about to be enveloped itself. And here's, this is amazing. That is amazing. We're talking about the best thing that's ever happened in the history of warfare, like most just daring and amazing how much distance and everything, and they're about to be surrounded by the Russians. This is a feat on both sides, yeah.
Didn't some German army got encircled on a peninsula? And they just kept fighting while they were trapped there.
Well, yeah.
It's like some peninsula in the Balkans.
Well, it sounds like the Crimea, there was a lot on defense. The Germans held the Crimea up until 1944, I think. They were there a long time. And also in Estonia, they were way up here, 1944.
Yeah, I think it was in Estonia.
Probably like that. This, I took this picture, it's probably like 2 years ago. I lifted this off the internet, this picture, and they still celebrate all these fronts. For example, let's see, like all of these are fronts. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fronts. Now, you and I would say that's the Eastern Front, but the Soviets, this is a front. There's 7 fronts of the Eastern Front. You see, that's a Soviet idea, that idea that on that Barbarossa sheet that says, kind of in the middle somewhere, let's see. Where is that? Oh, where right in the middle it says terminology, tactical, operational, and strategic. That's a Soviet idea. Like tactical is a one battle. Operational is a regional bunch of battles. And then there's strategic, which is this whole thing. The whole front is strategic. But the Soviets said, well, yeah, there's not just this front or one battle. There's operational battles. See, that's sort of like higher math. There's other ways of getting to that figure. there's another formula that you can get to. And so military theory is kind of like that. It's sort of like math. And the Soviets, of course, Soviets are famous for math. So it's kind of using that concept. Okay, so then by May of 1942, you can see they've advanced pretty far. Around Moscow. They relieved a lot of the pressure. Okay, look at that other Third Reich in the German Nazi state. So you can see here we are in 1942, about that same time after they lost the Battle of Moscow. Look how much land the Germans have conquered or dominated. It's all of Europe except for Switzerland, Sweden. So another way of looking at it, this is what they called as the Greater Third Reich. Pretty big. Remember, Germany was, just this. And then they made it to include German speakers that they conquered. And don't forget about Lebensraum. When you talk about why did it all come down to Russia? Remember Mein Kampf, and remember Hitler was obsessed with Eastern Europe, the Lebensraum. That's where they're going to go to get more living space, okay? So what was the land area that was part of Germany? Not what they conquered, but which part was actually Germany? Like the original Germany plus Austria. So jot it down. Austria, Czech, Alsace-Lorraine, which is part of France, Poland, most of Poland, and all the German-speaking places that they up until that time. So we're not talking about Ukraine. We're not talking about Belarus or Estonia or Denmark. We're talking just this. This is what Germany became. And that fulfilled Mein Kampf. Remember? We're going to unite, the Germans are going to unite all the German-speaking territories and all the traditional territories that he outlined.
How did Switzerland factor into all of this?
That's a good question.
Because, obviously they stayed neutral, but, they're right there next to Germany.
Yeah.
Did they ever talk to each other?
I think they just made an unspoken deal that it's not strategic for them. And so that's why they didn't factor into the war. But why did why did Hitler not include Switzerland, little parts of Switzerland at least, the German-speaking territory? I think he just thought it was just a waste of time. But that does show kind of hypocritical, there's Germans there just as much as there are in Alsace-Lorraine. So on one hand, he's got this theory, this book of all his theories of race and everything. But then when it comes down to some exceptions, I'm not Switzerland. Yeah, I don't know the answer, real good answer to that. But anyway, it's that big. Pretty big. How did the Nazis affect German life? So the SS. So I have the Schutzstaffel. What is the Schutzstaffel? That's the people that are called the SS. In other words, up there, it's the elite bodyguards of the government. Heinrich Himmler is simply the leader of that. The first leader was Goering, Hermann Goering, but Heinrich Himmler is the leader. That's all you need to know. He was the leader of the SS. Now, the SS, that's the elite units in the army and out of the army. There were some SS army units who were supposed to be the elite. But these are the people that are the cutthroat people domestically that go after political prisoners, get political opponents.
So the ideology that goes along with this is that there's Eastern Europe is really important, and the Germanic people are going to be united into one German-speaking nation. Oh yeah, see you. See you. Auf Wiedersehen. Okay, so Eastern Europe. The other part, what about the Slavs? The Slavs were substandard, race. So that everybody knows about the anti-Semitism, anti-Jew, that the Jews were expendable or just like rats that need to be exterminated. Remember the extermination camps. They even have that language of these are people that are like rats or roaches and you exterminate them. We have camps for that and they will be gone. And then I might have posted this. There's books, recent books. Last year there was the most recent one on this subject about German women who went into nursing. They were nursing students and became nurses before the war and during the war, and how they had been brainwashed into believing they didn't want to kill Jews, but they accepted. How do you deal with such a racial policy where they're saying these people are substandard humans and we're going to exterminate them as a government? And what does an average person see? Like, what are you going to do? And you go to school when you're 6 years old, and then 5 years later you're 11, and you've been 5 years in the government school hearing how the Jews are not really real people and that they're enemies of the state. And so remember what the communists did in Russia and China. They said not a racial state, but a class state. The bourgeois were the enemy. The proletariats are good guys. We're going to take from the bourgeois and we're going to redistribute to the proletariats. So they went after the kulak peasants, remember that? And they gave to everybody else. Well, the Nazis did the same thing. They changed the word from a class struggle to a race struggle. It's racial dominated. Jews and gypsies and Slavs, we can take from them and boycott them and give to the Aryans. You understand? So it's very, very similar. Politically incorrect books were burned. Persecution and killings. Obviously, we know about the Holocaust. So, persecution, killing of people who are impure, quote unquote. The Nuremberg laws stripped the German Jews, lost their citizenship. Euthanasia program. That's murdering people who are unfit. Maybe people who are born with deformities, or maybe old people. Maybe people who are not going to live a normal life, so they kill them ahead of time. That's called euthanasia in modern terms. But it's murder. T4 euthanasia program. The Nuremberg rallies, propaganda. It was basically big meetings. You've seen videos a bit about it, where they would torchlight parades and patriotic sounding themes and making you feel like you're part of a big special group. And then they burn books. It shows like you're so committed, pure. You're so committed to this religion that you're going to show. I'm going to burn Jewish books, certain Christian books. And that will show, that will signal how virtuous you are. minister of truth. You might have heard of that lately. There's a proposal in the United States government, in the United States House. The government's going to have a ministry of truth in the United States. And you think, do they think that we've never heard of that before? But won't that be good? They'll be able to tell you what websites and what newspapers and things are truthful. The government will say, this is not true. This is true. That's like Joseph Goebbels, who is the propaganda minister. Can't wait to see who's going to be in charge of that. It might be like Hillary Clinton or something. Maybe it's Donald Trump. Maybe he'll be the minister of truth. Racial thinking and Aryanization. Aryanization means that you're going to make Germany into a pure-blooded country. Pure blood. In other words, everybody's got to have pure German blood. And they would check people's size of their nose, the color of their eyes, the color of their skin, their hair, how straight they walk. They just made up these standards. If you had blue eyes and blonde hair, like, oh, definitely. There was a lot of Jews with blue eyes and blonde hair. Look at that law. The preservation of blood and honor law. Lots of laws. This is Aryanization, like to make sure that there's not many Jews that are in school. Make sure that everybody has pure blood. Make sure that everybody's committed to the struggle against the Jews. Jews were banned from the arts, composers, tunes, and so forth. Reminds you of what the communists did, right? Except it wasn't based on race. It wasn't based on race in the Soviet Union. It was based on class. That's the difference. Bourgeois or exterminated. Here, it's the Jews, the Slavs. A Mischling is somebody that has one grandparent that might be Jewish. So you could be partially Jew, then they make an exception. So you'd have some favor. Some bits of favor you were having, just a little bit of Jewish blood. You had 3/4 too much, like a full Jew. Oh, you didn't. The German converted to Judaism, that was another exception. He came back. German, became a Jew, then came back to German. That's okay. They had all kinds of rules about who's right. These kinds of people are better than these kinds of based on not the color of the skin, but on their race. Okay, another way of looking at it is like a target, like a bullseye. The core of society, Nazi core, was the real Nazis. Then the people who work for the Nazis are on another outside. Then there's people that just, they're doing it for their job and so forth. And then there's people that just happen to be part of the system. But if you were just on that outer level, it wasn't preferential. You had to be further in. You had to be committed to it. You had to become in the Nazi party. But all of that is like a slow motion where you are brainwashed. You're like tranquilized. You don't realize that these laws really mean what they say. They're just saying that about truth. They're just saying that about extermination. They're not really going to exterminate. They just use that word, exterminate. And then there's extermination camps. And then you find out they've been killing people. You were in the village right over there. you knew, what was that smell? What were they burning all the time? I don't know, they're making some chemical or something? No. And then there's people saying they're burning people up there. No, they're not burning people. They said they were going to burn people. Remember they said that? They burned books. They talked about exterminating. Yeah, but they're not burning people. What, all those people, there's train after train after train of people coming to that place. And when the train goes out, it's empty. So you're telling me they have hundreds of thousands of people living in that camp? Hundreds of thousands? There's not space. What happens to those people? Somebody said they're burning. There's no way they're burning. And then you connect it like, I learned something about this when I was in college, when I was in high school. They brainwashed us. It's crazy, but we just went along with it, like just to pass the test. So then, I took a test on Nazi ideology, and I passed. Do you believe it? I don't believe any of it, but I know what it is. And they will kill people. Sometimes it took after the fact, like, I should have known. So, one more couple of things. The Nazis, the law of the market. So here's where a lot of people, especially communists, look at the Nazis like, oh, well, see, they had a free market there. And see, the communists were against the market. Well, the Nazis weren't for the market, but here's how they propagandize, the communists do. But anyway, here's what happened, is if you were Jewish, you had a business, they would boycott your business. And they would make it so there were laws against Jews doing business. And so they had to make worse. They couldn't make as much profits. They had to sell at different prices than the average person. And so basically, the Jewish businesses were hurt. And they had to go by rules that other businesses, the Aryan businesses, didn't have to go by. So they couldn't make a profit as well. And so the market favored the Aryans, the Germans. And so people would say, well, sorry, the Jews lost in the market. But the market was distorted. Whenever you have a government that runs part of the economy, in any case, like in the United States, our government runs part of our market, and it distorts it. They don't allow just anybody to do business with the government. It has to be their friends. It has to be a friend of Trump or Biden or Clinton. Only people who do business with our government are friends and people who are politicians. Did you know that? You could never get a deal with the government. They won't let you have a deal. Like, can I wash the windows of the State Department? There's no way. It has to be a friend of a politician. Now that's in America. That's in America. Now think of what it is in communists or the Nazis. Man, you don't get any. You can be a Jew or a Christian or anything. No. It's got to be a Nazi. And so they forced Jews into bankruptcy. So they said, well, we didn't the communists, what the communists did to businesses, they just confiscated the whole business. And they just closed the business and they gave the property to the working class. That's what the communists did. Nazis didn't do that. They allowed the business to stay in business, but they passed laws where it was impossible to do business. So then the business would go out of business. And those were the Jewish businesses. Do you see? And then who gets to have that business? Some German gets to buy that business for 10 cents on the dollar. Remember Schindler's List? Ever seen that movie? It's very realistic. But that's not about the German economy, it's about the Holocaust and how Germans got business from taking advantage of Jews. Jews had these big businesses and they were boycotted. They had to lose their business, so they'd sell their business for 10 cents on the dollar, about 10%. And the Germans would buy all this. And it's because of the Nazi laws. And so the Jews started immigrating. A lot of them came to the United States and Israel and so forth. This was before the war. But when they did immigrate, and that's what the German government wanted, is for the Jews to immigrate, leave, and to go to places like Madagascar, go somewhere else. the Germans were thinking about setting up Madagascar as a place for, instead of killing the Jews, let's just send them all to Madagascar. But that was too expensive. So they decided on just rounding them up and put them in a camp. See what happens. But even if they did immigrate, they could only keep 5% of their property. That's what the communists did too. It was probably 10%. I have a lot of friends that immigrated to the United States from the Soviet Union, and you can't just take everything. You can't empty the bank account. They don't let you take your money. Communism doesn't let you take your money. That's their money. You know? Nazis, same thing. So it's Aryanization of the economy. So think about this. It's like 1/3, they don't really care, but they take advantage. They loan money. They loan money to start a business. Then they force the business owners to go out of business, and so the owners own their business. They're the people who invested. That's the Nuremberg laws. That banned, boycotted Jewish business. It's not a free market at all. It's totally controlled. Total control of the economy. It's to eliminate the Jews from the market and to redistribute their property to ease the people. You see? The communists did the same thing. The only thing difference is what? What's the only difference between one took property and gave it away, the other one took property and gave it away? What's the difference?
Race.
That's right, race and class. One is based on race, like that race is worthless, I'm going to take from them, give to the good race. The other one is class. The bourgeois, we're taking from the bourgeois, we'll give it to the proletariat. Okay, so maybe on Monday, I'll post a little quiz and use your notes. I don't know, just to keep you fresh. Like 10, I don't know what that. 10 or 20 questions. Use your notes. I'll try to post the slide real soon the next day. Okay? So I hope this class will be easy for you. I mean, it'll be hard, but it'll be easy in terms of how much work you got to put out from now on. You guys.